Taking a company global. I mean, it's the ultimate dream, right? Planting your flag on every continent. But it's also a total minefield, a place where fortunes are lost and even the biggest names can stumble. So what separates the world conquerors from the casualties? Okay, let's dive in and unpack this.
When you look at a world map, what do you see? For any company, it's this huge horizon of new customers and endless growth. But taking a product that's a hit in your home country and trying to make it work somewhere else, that is one of the biggest, toughest challenges in business. It is a journey absolutely littered with hidden traps, cultural, political, you name it.
So that really brings us to this central question, the big puzzle we're trying to solve here. How does a successful local brand actually make that leap and become a global powerhouse? I'll tell you this much, it's not about luck, and it's not just about having a great product. It's all about having the right strategy.
And believe me, even the pioneers can get it spectacularly wrong. Just look at Benetton. For a while, they were unstoppable, just revolutionary. They expanded like wildfire across Europe with this one-size-fits-all, highly coordinated approach. But then, the market changed. Customers started wanting more local flavor, and Benetton's rigid structure, the very thing that made them so successful, made it almost impossible for them to adapt.
See, this is exactly why just reacting or sticking to one rigid plan often ends in failure. What you really need is a smarter, more methodical way to do things. Let's call it the step-by-step expansion blueprint. It's about being careful, being cautious, and taking small, smart, incremental steps.
Now, the core idea behind this whole blueprint is something called psychic distance. And this is a really powerful concept because it completely redefines what distance means. We're not just talking about miles on a map here. It's about the perceived gap in culture, politics, language, business practices between your home turf and a brand new market. The smaller that psychic distance, well, the lower your risk. So this whole blueprint really boils down to three pretty simple rules. First up, expand to the countries with the lowest psychic distance first, the ones that are culturally and politically the most similar to you. Rule number two, lead with your most established, your most mature products, not the new experimental stuff. And third, start small. Use a low-commitment way to get in, like using a local agent, long before you even think about building a factory.
Okay, so theory is great and all, but let's see how this thing actually works in the real world. We're going to look at two amazing examples of Swedish companies that absolutely mastered the sequential approach, H&M and Sandvik.
All right, let's start with H&M. If you look at their expansion timeline, it tells such a fascinating story. They started in Sweden in 1947, right? But they didn't just jump to the US or China. No way. They went to Norway first, then Denmark. Their closest neighbors with super similar cultures and economies. After that, they moved to the UK, a place where, a lot of Swedes speak the language and follow the culture. It was only after they had mastered these close markets that they moved into the rest of Europe. This is just a masterclass in minimizing psychic distance.
But this whole strategy, it's about so much more than just geography. With every new country, H&M was learning. They were building this deep well of knowledge about how to operate internationally. And that brings us to an even more powerful example of this in action, Sandvik.
Okay, now I know this chart looks a little complex at first, but it is brilliant. It shows a century of disciplined learning for Sandvik. On the left, you've got the countries they entered, all ranked by psychic distance from Sweden. The timeline moves from left to right. So what you're seeing isn't just a map of where they went, it's a map of how they learned and deepened their commitment over 100 years.
So let's decode what we're seeing. Those black dots, that's a low commitment entry, just using an agent. The empty circles, that's a bigger step, opening their own sales subsidiary. And the X, that marks the highest level of commitment, building a full-on manufacturing subsidiary. See the pattern? They started small, learned the market, and only then did they ramp up their investment. And here is the real payoff. In the early days, it took Sandvik decades to move from one of those stages to the next. But over time, they got so good at this, they learned so much that they could slash that time dramatically. They literally built a muscle for international learning, and it became their secret weapon, their core competitive advantage.
So we've seen how powerful this methodical, step-by-step approach can be. But what happens when a huge company just ignores it? Well, for that, we turn to the cautionary tale of Walmart's international expansion.
Yeah, Walmart's timeline tells a very, very different story. Is it sequential? Not even close. I mean, they start close to home in Mexico and Canada, which makes perfect sense. But then, whoa, it's this huge leap to China, then over to Germany, then back to South Korea. There's no clear logic here. no gradual baby steps. It's just a scattered, opportunistic approach that's often been called flag planting.
And the result of this scattershot strategy? Well, the analysis is pretty blunt. Internationally, it was more or less a failure. Their big bets in markets with high psychic distance, like Germany and South Korea, were massive, costly failures. They learned the hard way that you can't just copy and paste what works at home and expect it to work everywhere else. So here you have it, laid out perfectly. The two paths. On one side, you have H&M's logical, step-by-step march across similar markets. On the other, you have Walmart's chaotic, opportunistic jumps all over the globe. One built a solid foundation of knowledge, the other just kept stumbling.
And this really gets us to the real secret behind doing global expansion right. It's not about having a perfect, one-time plan or just a list of countries you want to enter. The strategy itself is designed to create a process, an engine for continuous learning.
And this is just so powerful. For a company like Sandvik, going international wasn't just a growth tactic they tried out. They built it into their DNA. It became a core capability, a muscle they built over a century, that was just as critical to their success as marketing or R&D. Think about that. So in the end, this step-by-step blueprint isn't just about playing it safe and minimizing risk. Its real power is that it forces an organization to learn. True global success isn't about having the perfect map from day one. It's about building an organization that learns, adapts, and gets smarter with every single border it crosses.
And that leaves us with a final question to really think about. When we're planning for the future, whether it's global expansion or anything else, are we just creating a static map to follow? Or are we building a dynamic engine for learning? The answer to that question might just make all the difference.